That's incredible. And, there's different evolutions of a personal injury law firm, right? There's the bootstrappers that start and they have a limited budget and they're doing the things that don't scale. And then you have the mid-sized firm, and then they have a seasoned firm that's got some big cases and a bigger marketing budget. How has that shifted? Were you all direct response, and then now you've shifted, a percentage to brand? Like, what's kind of like the split, not the dollars, but the split look like?
Yeah. So, well, do you mind if I take a tangential way of answering that, because
Sure,
I think it's important for your listeners, if it's okay.
absolutely.
So, I think if people listen to our first podcast, they probably would have heard me say at one time, I'm never going to be, doing branding and marketing and everything other than just SEO. I was very comfortable having very high profit margins and getting a lot of referrals from other lawyers and having an inbound way of getting clients through the website. Because obviously every dollar you don't spend on marketing and advertising is a dollar that you keep as profit. What changed for me is I think most lawyers don't really understand what's coming in the next couple of years. And for example, one of the things that's coming is there are changes that are already in place that almost nobody knows about, but that can cut the number of auto accident cases that we have literally in half. So one of the things, for example, is Pete Buttigieg at the Department of Transportation issued what's called a proposed rulemaking last year, and it is currently being evaluated. And they're going to issue a final determination next month, actually in April. But it was about whether they should have mandatory automatic emergency braking in all vehicles that are made in the United States. Now, what's interesting is the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety says that if every vehicle in America has front end crash avoidance technology like automatic emergency braking, which is what we're talking about, they believe it's going to cut the number of auto accident cases by about 50% in as early as 3 years. Think about
Wow,
that. That
that's
means
incredible.
that means most personal injury lawyers are walking around today and they have no clue that potentially they could lose 50% of their auto accident cases in the next 3 years. Now, what's interesting is as an auto accident and truck accident lawyer myself, I actually think it's going to be higher than 50%, because I look at my cases and, I would say when I look at all the rear enders at red lights and, people stopped in traffic on freeways and, people that get hit by someone who's texting and driving, I mean, I think that might be closer to 70% of my cases.
Wow.
So, and we can get into things like fleet turnover and when this is going to be widely adapted. But the point is, it's going to be here faster than people think. And here's the thing that people don't realize is even if the rule doesn't pass next month, it's already here, right? When my son turned 16, I bought him a car that has a very modestly priced car that has front end crash avoidance, which means that my son literally, I mean, it's almost impossible for him to rear end somebody because the car will stop itself. So the technology is already here and it's already starting to infiltrate the market, which I have to emphasize is a great thing. I mean, it's going to make the world a
Hmm.
safer place and a better place. But for our audience, as a world of personal injury lawyers, you know, I don't think anybody's thinking about what our world is going to look like, where you could potentially lose 50% of your entire office in, let's say, the next 3 to 5 years. So that is what brought me to your question now, which is, what do you do when this is coming? And the way I looked at it, I only had two choices. One is, what are the ways that I could then start to be able to grab a bigger slice of what will soon be a shrinking pie of cases? Because there's only so many auto accident cases every month. And then if that number starts to shrink because of these wonderful changes with safety technology, how can you grab a larger share of a shrinking pie? And the second thing is now the time to start exploring other areas of practices, other areas of law that are much less competitive, much more lucrative, much more blue ocean, so to speak. Because, as the saying goes, it's much, the best time to plant a tree is yesterday, but the second best time to plant a tree is today. And I'd much rather be entering new areas of practice now than
Mm-hmm.
try and do it, let's say, 5 years from now, when everybody's already losing their heads and desperate, and everyone's trying to do it all at once. So those are the two big changes, and that's what led me to, for example, start branding and using our friend Gary Sarner, who's by the way been terrific to work with.
First of all, I didn't think it was going to go this direction, and I'm glad it did, right? I thought you were going to go the direction of consolidation and not only the abundance of personal injury law firms, now you got the marketers and private equity trying to compete for the smaller slices. So that's also an issue, right?
Well, it's all tied in together. I mean, think about the irony of it, that at this moment in time, March 7, 2024, when we're recording this together, you have right now more lawyers and more money chasing what is very soon to be a quickly shrinking pool of cases. And yeah, I mean, it's shocking. You have these law firms that are getting 9-figure hedge fund loans to do single event, marketing. The way they used to do in mass torts. You've got all this money. You do have massive consolidation. You have all these factors, and I think most lawyers still have their head in the sands and think this isn't going to affect them. But it all ties them together, and that's again why, for me at least, the decision was pretty easy. In a world where there's going to be a shrinking pie of cases, I wanted to do both. So I finally made the plunge into marketing and branding, especially, which has been wonderful. I mean, before I started this, every lawyer and every judge in Michigan knew who I was, but the public sure didn't. And and the other thing is, for people who are listening to this is where someone like you comes in handy, right? I mean, there are, and it's going to change a little bit depending on what state you're in and what city,
Mm-hmm.
but working with someone like you, it's not very hard. You do some keyword research, look at what areas of law have huge search volume, and then look and see what the competition is like in your area. And there will be tremendous opportunities. And the question is, do you want to explore those opportunities now when you can do it? Or do you want to do it 5 years from now when you have to do it? I'd
I
rather do it now.
There's so much here. So first of all, my mind was immediately going to, Michigan premises liability law.com or premiseslaw.com as your next niche specialization. And you're already familiar, with the investigators and the things that go into the more challenges for trucking and having to get that evidence and preserve that evidence. And, it lends itself to that skill set of premises and some slip and
Absolutely.
falls, things like that. I came to this a little bit different. Okay, so I saw the enhancement of technology, but I'm going to really wear my super SEO nerd hat here. And for my
Nerd out
competitors,
for us, Chris.
for
Nerd
my
out.
competitors listening here, they're gonna just think this is really weird. But what I do is I track the content that's created on the biggest personal injury law firm site to see what cases they're interested in. So, for example, take my friends over at Morgan and Morgan, right? Dan and those individuals. I was tracking the creation of their new content, and they had an abundance of premises content, right?
Mm-hmm.
So shifting away from the auto, and I won't name some other firms, but I started to see the diversification into other areas, and then I kind of came to a similar solution or findings that you did, but kind of in a different way. I think it's so interesting. I've always wondered, right? The auto cases, you got the asynchronous bets, especially the buses, the garbage trucks,
Mm-hmm.
the semis, the 18-wheelers, but I've always, someone gets a slip and fall, and it's the liability's clearly there. and they get a head injury, I've always just wondered why those cases weren't pursued more. Um,
Well, funny you should say all that because one of my new 4 law firms that I've started is a slip and fall law firm. Because, hey, in a world where there might be autonomous vehicles in 10 years and all this safety technology, there sadly will still be people getting very seriously injured in premises liability cases. Let me pose a question to you, if you don't mind.
sure, let's do it.
So I'm curious. And by the way, for your audience, I promise you none of this was rehearsed or this is all totally on the fly. But I think people who are your clients have a huge advantage over law firms like Morgan and Morgan. And this is going to be a gross oversimplification, but tell me if you think there's some truth to this. So the ability of a smaller law firm to go very targeted and very niche and create these microsites that are 100% strictly targeted to, let's say, whatever area law it is. What you're doing is you're letting Google or other search engines know that when they're returning search results for someone who's looking for, let's say, the best slip and fall lawyer or the best work comp lawyer or the best dog bite lawyer or best QTAM lawyer, whatever it is, if you can create a website that is 100 pages of content, all the links are very, very relevant and authoritative, and you're demonstrating your expertise, your authority, your trust, your subject matter mastery, unlike a gigantic website like Morgan and Morgan that is advertising for probably, if we add in the class actions and mass torts, maybe 100 different areas. You're creating a very easy way for not just the public who might be looking for the very best lawyer in that area, but also for the search engines. And I think you have a huge advantage by doing that, by digging deep, not wide, and creating these additional websites.